Peace, light, and love, YouTube. It is your man, J-Pharaoh. Today I'm be covering a very important topic that's come to my attention by way of joining the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party. That's the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party that I recently joined by way of meeting some really powerful brothers who are working for really important change in our African American communities. One of these really important issues is that of Jermaine Doss out of Norfolk, Virginia, who is wrongfully incarcerated and has been for over 20 years for a murder that he did not commit, and that he's not even being questioned of whether he committed it or not. I want to talk about this as one of several topics that have come my way to speak about. So, Jermaine Doss. So please do share this video, like, subscribe. That all helps in getting information out. So we're talking about brother Jermaine Doss. He is from Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia. He was falsely accused and convicted of murder after an employee of his. He had a salon. This is Jermaine Doss, his parents, some family members. Jermaine Doss here had a salon that he owned, and an employee of his was arrested near the scene of a murder that he did commit. The employee of his committed a murder, and when the employee of his was arrested, the employee said that Jermaine had hired him to commit the murder. Right after the actual killer was arrested and has said that Jermaine Doss was a part of it by way of hiring the killer then refused to testify in court, and had wrote a letter to Jermaine saying that he had apologized for saying that he was involved with the murder when he knew that he wasn't. So then at that point, Jermaine Doss had been released. But then, check this out. The killer says to this day, for all these 20 years, that the law enforcement principalities had said that he would face the death penalty if not. Hold up. Stop. Excuse me. The law enforcement said that the killer would face the death penalty if not identifying Jermaine Doss as the killer. As the person who hired him to make the murder, to do the murder. So at that point, the killer reaccused Jermaine Doss, and then Jermaine Doss was rearrested. And since then, the actual killer has again recanted his statement, saying that Jermaine Doss was involved in this situation, in this murder, and the actual killer has been to appeal hearings, has been to these court hearings, and signing these affidavits saying that Jermaine Doss did not hire him to kill the man, and that he had falsely accused Jermaine Doss. Now check this one huge extreme thing. The actual killer got 17 years in prison. 17 years in prison. Jermaine Doss, who the man is, 1 minute allegedly, not next minute allegedly in the beginning, saying, and now for the past 23 years saying this man did not do this. He has said that this man hired him to kill the person, and he got life and 34 years in prison. He got life in prison plus 34 more years in prison. And the actual killer got 17 years. How wild is that? How wild is that? Jermaine Doss out of Norfolk, Virginia, he had a salon. He had a salon and had an employee who worked in the salon who killed a man. The employee said that he had something to do with it, and he had hired him to do it. Then the employee said, well, no, he actually did not do that. Then the employee said again that the man did do it. After the officer said, hey, man, you're going to be facing the death penalty if you don't say that this man did it. He said, oh, well, boom. He involved Jermaine again to avoid the death penalty. And the killer got 17 years. The man who actually confessed and they know to be the murderer got 17 years in prison. This man who has been falsely accused of hiring him got life and 34 years in prison. The man who killed the actual person gets out in April of 2025. This man supposed to be in jail for the rest of his life. The person who killed him gets out in next year. After serving 17 years, this man who didn't commit the murder got life in 34 years in prison. And when the murderer is getting out next year. So there is some really bananas details about this situation. So Jermaine had said that the officer who had arrested him for murder had given him some type of ultimatum of paying some large sum of money or going to prison and for these charges, which sounds crazy, right? But check this. That officer was later arrested for doing the exact same thing and got sentenced for 2.5 years in prison for extortion and for lying about it. So Jermaine said before the officer got arrested that this officer came to him and told him that if he didn't pay this large amount of money, that he was going to face the charges. The charges were going to be pinned against him. And then that sounds crazy. But then then the same officer actually does, from other cases, get convicted of doing that very thing of offering money for lower charges. For money, he would offer lower charges for money, and he did that extortion, and then he was confirmed about it and lied about it, and therefore faced the charges he got and sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. That's the officer who arrested Jermaine Doss, who Jermaine Doss said was trying to extort him. After an employee of his who killed someone said that he hired him, and then said he didn't hire him. Then said he hired him. Then been saying he didn't hire him for the past 20 years. And then the courts are saying that even though the killer who actually committed the murder, the killer said that Jermaine Doss was involved in it, and that's the only evidence tying Jermaine to the situation. There's nothing else except for this killer saying that Jermaine did it. That Jermaine hired him. There's nothing else. The killer said that he killed the person, but the killer is saying that Jermaine Doss hired him. And that's the only thing that the officers, the police, the law has against Jermaine at all. And they sent the man to prison for life in 34 years off of this man saying that he hired him. That he was hired by him. But then the man goes to the judge before the judge and says he was lying and that this man actually did not have anything to do with it. And then the judge says that because the killer said that at first that he was involved with it, that the killer's statement was no longer justified, was no longer viable, was no longer significant, and recanting these charges, removing these charges, lessening these charges against this man. So it's like, whoa, the man could say that he hired him to kill someone, and that's give him life in 34 years. But if this man says that he was lying against this man, and this is an innocent man, then also the law says that his statement is no longer significant. It was significant enough to give this man life in 34 years, but it's not significant enough as the only piece of evidence you got for the killer to say that this man is actually innocent and that the killer was lying. The killer was lying. Go figure. Oh my God, it's so hard to believe. The killer was lying when he accused this man and then removed his statement. And they still got this man pinned for life in 34 years in prison. Life and 34 years in prison. A lifetime and then 34 years. And gave the killer 17. That don't even sound right. So this officer who arrested him, this officer convicted of extortion, who Jermaine said that this officer tried to extort him. There is the Innocence Project coming from the School of Law at the University of Virginia. So at UVA, in Charlottesville, Virginia, there's a School of Law, and they have been instrumental in getting 3 other cases. The charges dropped, or these people are released, based in which the same officer that arrested Jermaine Doss was the arresting officer in the other 3 cases. So there are 3 cases since Jermaine's arrest, and since the officer was actually found to actually be extorting people, and was charged with extortion and lying about it, and given 2.5 years in prison. Since that time, 3 cases have been granted freedom or release, in which the arresting officer was the same officer that arrested Jermaine Doss, and Jermaine is saying that this officer did the same thing to him and is trying to extort him. And it is hearing this and not helping this man, just letting this just go on. He been in there for over 20 years, and they know he didn't kill the man. And the only thing that involving him to the case at all is that his employee said that he hired him to kill him. That's the only thing. And then the employee said that he was lying. The employer said that he was lying against the man, and he's still in prison for over 20 years, and the killer's getting out next year. After only 17 years compared to a lifetime and plus 34 years. So Jermaine Doss has had 3 different contacts to the governor's office for pardon requests. So he initially submitted a pardon request under the Republican governor, Robert McDaniel, which he got no response. Then they tried again with the second governor, Terry McAuliffe. Terry McAuliffe was a Democrat governor, and Jermaine Doss also did not hear anything from Terry McAuliffe's council. And then when Ralph Northam, another Democratic governor, was elected, Jermaine Doss was able to have a phone call about the appeal that he had submitted 8 years ago, and didn't hear anything about in response to it. And at that point, the governor said that he would look into why he didn't hear anything, and then the only response he got was that the appeal had been denied, and that was the response he got 8 years after submitting the appeal. So this man has been trying. It's like he's been trying and being ignored, not being heard, not being given consideration. It's taken him 8 years to even get one appeal response. He's definitely in need of a lot of support. A lot of advocates are for him, and a lot of people to make the noise for this brother. My heart really goes to his family, to him. God bless him, send him much light and peace, and deliverance, and all the great and goodness of God, and the greatness and goodness of God in his life, and his every second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, year by year, decade by decade, that this man is going through this over 20 years. So there's a situation where they're trying to get Jermaine Doss parole. Now, there was a time between 1995 in 2000 that that parole had been abolished, and jurors didn't know this. So of course, a lot of us have heard through books and different plots, whether it be on TV or in theater or wherever it might be, where people might be sentenced to a huge amount of time, and oftentimes serve only a partial amount of that time, and that would be a huge consideration, and what the jurors would determine would be appropriate as a sentence for someone who would be convicted of something. So, but in 1995, parole had been abolished, but between 1995 and the year 2000, jurors didn't know this. So as they were debating or determining what would be the appropriate sentence for those to be convicted, they were taking into consideration that people were more than likely expected to, at some point, receive parole for the offense, and therefore not serve the entire time that was given in the sentence. You dig? A lot of us have heard of that. We've heard that, we've seen that, through books, TV, what have you. And so that was the case. And then, but then there's this time frame between 1995 and 2000 where these people are called fishback prisoners. Because during this 5-period time between 1995 and the year 2000, this is the fishback period because there was no parole for offered or to be offered to these people receiving charges or being convicted of charges. But the people who are critical in the sentence, the jurors, did not know this, and were expecting some aspect of parole to be, a huge potentiality for these people, but it wasn't. And so then in the year 2000, this is a case between a man like David Fishback. So this man David Fishback had this case, and in that case, the Supreme Court had determined that it was, it was not it defies reason. That's what it says. Defies reason for a juror for jurors to not know that there is no such thing as parole when they determine the appropriate conviction or sentence or what have you for these people being convicted of charges. So it would defy reason for the jurors to not know that there is no such thing as parole, as their reasoning was the appropriate punishment, what have you, for the person being convicted of the charges. So then in that case in 2000 with David Fishback, that was able to help that person in that case, because then the jurors were informed that there's no such thing as parole, so they were able to factor that into making that judgment against David Fishback. So then fast forward to 20 years later, talking about fast forward, I bet for Jermaine Doss it wasn't like a fast forward, 20 freaking years. It's so long, man. And then 2020, in 2020, there's this thing now where the General Assembly, the Virginia General Assembly, it says all this in here. And Virginia General Assembly, they determined that those who were convicted of charges between 1995 and the year 2000, so between the year 1995 and the year 2000, probably flipped around for you, but whatever. So between the year of 1995 and 2000, those prisoners who were not being offered or considered for parole because there was no such thing as parole because of it being abolished, were now being offered consideration for parole. Like they can be considered for parole, whereas the law, the judgment on them was that they would not be in any way potentially up for parole because it had been abolished. But the jurors did not know this. So the people in the court, the jurors, did not know that parole was abolished. They thought it was a very real thing, like so many other people would have thought, because they weren't told that parole wasn't. So if somebody gets 10 years, and then maybe they get parole and get less than that, however much they might be. The whole grand scheme of it is 10, and likely, they will get, heard that. They'll get less than that full 10. They say they have good behavior, what have you. Things like that. But that's what the jurors were thinking for all those cases between 1995 and 2000. But so when Jermaine Doss's case, parole had been abolished, but the jurors did not know that parole had been abolished in the time of his case when he got life and 34 years. How do you expect somebody to even serve life in 34 years? They were thinking of course, people consider some option of parole. Life in 34 years, and the actual killer got 17 years. Who was there at the crime scene, having killed the man, got 17 years. The man who ain't nothing attached to him but this killer lying and saying he was involved got life in 34 years with no parole. How you can help? Please do. You can write a letter to the Parole Board and urge its members to grant parole to Jermaine Doss. So you can write a letter to the Parole Board. Jermaine Doss's number is 1009227. It's right here. Hopefully y'all can see it. But again, you can write a letter to the Parole Board and really ask the members to give parole to Jermaine Doss. Number 1009227. 1009227. Virginia Parole Board, 6900 Atmore Drive, 6900 Atmore Drive, Richmond, Virginia, 23225. Again, you can write a letter to the Parole Board and ask the members to grant Jermaine Doss parole. Jermaine Doss, number 1009227. Virginia Parole Board, 6900 Atmore Drive, Richmond, Virginia, 23225. Or you can send the board an email through its website. The website is vpb.virginia.gov/contact. vpb.virginia.gov/contact. Or call or fax the board at phone number 804-674-3081. The phone number is 804-674-3081. The fax is 804-674-3284. Again, the fax number is 804-674-3284. There's a petition online. I've signed the petition. I pray that you also sign the petition for Jermaine Doss. Sign the petition for this man so that he will be considered for parole. This is a petition to say, hey, grant this man parole. He's been in prison for over 20 years for a murder that he did not do, and that the killer said that he didn't do. Come on, the killer said that he lied at the time of him being arrested at the crime scene, saying that this man who was his boss had hired him to commit this murder, and that he was lying. The killer has said that. The killer, who is serving 17 years and gets out next year, said that his boss hired him and got his boss a lifetime sentence in prison. And then said his boss actually didn't have anything to do with it. And the boss is still in prison, and the killer's getting out next year. Because the boss got life and 34 years in prison, and the killer, the employee who said he killed the man, said his boss hired him and killed the man, got 17 years. The petition for Jermaine is go on to change.org and you search for his name. Go on to change.org, search, and then go to the top and click on the little drop down bar, click down for search, put Jermaine Doss in the search field, and his petition is going to pop up. And then you can go ahead and just sign a petition. The petition is saying, give this man parole. Let him out of prison. He's been in there for 23 years for a murder he did not do. And the killer's saying that he did not do it. The killer was saying, that he was working for the man's employee and then lied on the man. And of course, it's saying, okay, the killer can now say the truth and say he lied on the man, but that's not going to do anything. We're going to keep the man in prison. The only piece of evidence that's got him in prison is now it's a human being who actually did kill the person who is saying that he lied on his boss to get the boss in trouble. And then of course we're not gonna do anything about that either. We're gonna leave the man in there for a lifetime. We have nothing else against him. Just leave him in there. What? This shit is crazy. And this is stuff that happens so often, man, especially to us black and brown motherfucking people. Like, they don't care. Just like we just saw Sonya Massey had a bullet in her head. They could try to help her and get a kit and try to help her because, like many people have said, many people have survived gunshots, wounds to the head. She would have been the first or the last person to have survived a gunshot wound to her head. And the woman was on the ground breathing and bleeding out from her head, and they won't try and do shit for the woman. Let's leave her there. Let's leave her there. What the fuck? This man, he been lied on. He didn't do this shit. They know the man didn't kill the man in the first place. Now the person actually killed him said that he lied on the man, said that this man hired him to do it. And the truth is that this man did not do it. Just leave him in there. Just leave him in there. It's what it sounds the fuck to me. Excuse my language. But you know, it just gets you upset after a while, or at all times, you know. But it's please do go to change.org and sign a petition for Jermaine Doss. Change.org. Go to the top, click on the drop down menu, select search, put in the search box Jermaine Doss, and then it's just gonna pop up. It's take you a few seconds to click it and sign it and keep it moving, and then spread the word, share the post. Free Jermaine Doss. Appreciate you. This is one thing I'm gonna cover for I joined an amazing group of people, the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party. The Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party. And this is how I've learned about Jermaine Doss out of Norfolk, Virginia, who is in prison for over 20 years so far, serving a lifetime plus 34 years sentence for a murder that he did not do and that the courts know that he did not do. They know that the killer who was arrested at the crime scene said that this man who owned a salon and that the killer worked at, that he hired him to do it, then said that he was lying. Then then right after that, he lied. He said that he was lying, and they've been saying that for all the past over 20 years since then. At the time of his arrest, he had lied and said that his boss had hired him. To get the boss in trouble, to get this man in trouble, and did. And then the killer got 17 years, and this man got life in 34 years for not doing a thing, for not doing anything. So go sign his petition at change.org. Search easily for Jermaine Doss. Search for Jermaine Doss. Sign the petition. Peace, light, and love. I'm your man, J-Pharaoh. Please share the video, comment, like, subscribe to help get the message out. Appreciate you. Peace.